Really interesting video. Just had the pleasure of this hot guy coming over for a bit of fun, and then realised he filmed me, and I'm like, you should have just asked. I would have let you film me. And when you come back next time, bring your wife and I'll do it too. So have a listen to this. This is really good. Just going to put it on.
Somewhere right now, not metaphorically, not poetically.
How good is the script writers of this video? And this guy, I'll show you who he is.
Right now, while you're watching this, there is a meeting happening that you were never supposed to know about. Not a dramatic meeting, not a shadowy room with men in suits and red string on a corkboard. Something far more ordinary than that. A spreadsheet review, a behavioral model that keeps spitting back the same result. A room full of people who get paid extraordinary amounts of money to understand human beings, sitting in unusual silence, staring at data
and look at
that doesn't make sense. And
the text below
is you. Not because you blew anything up, not because you organized anything or leaked anything or said the wrong thing to the wrong person. You just lived. You existed quietly on your own terms in a way that their model says, has always said, continues to insist, shouldn't be working. And yet here you are, working, more than working, thriving in the specific unhurried way that makes institutional analysts absolutely lose their minds. Because thriving outside the system is the one variable they never built a column for. That meeting, by the way, they've been having it for years. Here is what you need to understand before anything else I say. These people, the architects of the systems you move through every single day, they have a word for everything. That is not an exaggeration, and it is not a conspiracy theory. It is the single most important thing they do. They have taxonomies of human behavior that go 17 categories deep. They have named things you haven't named about yourself yet. They can classify your spending pattern, your compliance threshold, your breaking point under financial pressure, your likelihood to stay in a bad situation based on your zip code and your parents' tax bracket, and the specific flavor of the security your childhood installed. They are extraordinarily, almost artistically good at naming things. They name things because named things can be managed. Named things can be predicted, sorted, filed, leveraged. Named things cannot surprise you. Named things cannot escape the box you built for them because the box was constructed specifically around the shape of the thing. And then, and I want you to sit with this for a second, they ran the process on you. And the machine, this beautiful, expensive, decades-in-the-making machine for converting human beings into predictable, manageable, monetizable units, went completely silent. Not an error message, not a red flag. Silence. The specific silence that a system produces when it encounters an input it was never written to handle. The silence of software reaching the edge of its own logic and finding nothing on the other side. You did not fight the machine. You did not outsmart it. You did not mount a courageous rebellion against it. You just existed in a way it couldn't process, and the machine, the whole machine, all of it, had no response to that. Has no response to that. Still, right now, sitting in that meeting, has absolutely no response to that. And I find that genuinely, deeply funny. Because let me show you what you walked past without even noticing. The system appraises every human being, not dramatically, not with fanfare, quietly, from birth. The neighborhood you're born into gets a school funding number. That number determines the ceiling your teachers believe you have. That ceiling determines what you believe is possible for someone who looks like you, grew up like you, came from where you came from. What you believe is possible determines the size of the life you attempt. The size of the life you attempt determines how threatening you are to the people whose comfort depends on you staying small. It is not a conspiracy. It is a system, and the difference matters because conspiracies can be exposed and dismantled. Systems just run. Systems are self-maintaining. Systems don't need anyone to be evil. They just need everyone to do their part without asking why the part exists. By the time you're 20, the appraisal is complete. They've sorted you into one of 3 categories, and they would never call them categories because the whole architecture only functions when the people inside it don't know it's an architecture. The first, the leveraged. These are the people whose debt is their leash, not a dramatic leash, a spreadsheet leash. Mortgage, student loans, car payments, the cost of maintaining a lifestyle they were sold before they had the context to evaluate. The math on their life has been arranged so that the cost of non-conformity is always slightly higher than the cost of compliance. They don't stay in jobs they hate because they're cowards. They stay because someone calibrated exactly how much financial pressure it takes to make freedom feel irresponsible. These people are managed through arithmetic. Cold, clean, elegant arithmetic. The second, the validated. These are the people whose identity lives inside an institution. The title on the business card, the diploma on the wall, the company name dropped at dinner as proof of worth. Remove the institution and something genuinely vertiginous happens. They don't know who they are. Not because they're shallow, because they were trained from the first gold star in the first grade to outsource their sense of self to external structures. And the training worked because it was designed to work, because a person whose identity requires institutional maintenance will never, ever bite the hand that's maintaining it. These people aren't imprisoned, they're curated. The third, the comfortable. The ones who traded their edge for stability so gradually that by the time the edge was gone, they'd forgotten they'd ever had it. They're not oppressed, they're sedated. And sedated, I promise you, is so much cheaper to maintain than oppressed. 3 categories. Billions of people sorted, filed, and running exactly as designed. And then there's you. You who looked at all 3 options, the leash, the borrowed identity, the slow sedation, and felt something that wasn't quite rebellion. Rebellion is loud. Rebellion is reactive. Rebellion still cares what it's pushing against. What you felt was quieter. It was just a flat, unhurried no. The way you declined something that was never even tempting. The way you turned down an invitation to a party you didn't want to attend. At a venue that doesn't interest you, full of people performing a version of themselves for other people performing a version of themselves. The whole room full of mirrors, reflecting nothing real. You didn't storm out, you just didn't go. If that just hit somewhere real, drop 444 in the comments. You know why. That quiet no is the most expensive sound in the world to a system that runs on yes. And I say expensive because I want to talk about what they actually spent on you, because they didn't ignore you. They invested heavily, consistently, for years, and they expected a return. Think about the resources. 13 plus years of compulsory education engineered not to make you smart. Smart people ask inconvenient questions, but to make you trainable, to install the belief that the right answer already exists. Your job is to find it, and the people who have it are the ones grading your paper. Millions of hours of curriculum designed with one silent, never stated goal. Produce someone who will sit in a chair, follow instructions, and call it ambition. Then, the more personal investments, the job that paid just enough to keep you reaching but never enough to make you free. That's not market rate, that's a calibration. The relationship that asked you to be slightly less than you were in exchange for not being alone. That's not just bad luck. That's a pattern that succeeds at a documented rate. The social circle that rewarded you with belonging when you played along and went quiet the moment you started asking questions. That's not just how people are. That's social pressure functioning as a management tool, and it is brutally effective on almost everyone. Every single one of those was a bet, a calculated data-backed bet that the accumulated weight of debt and loneliness and social pressure and financial squeeze would eventually do what it does to everyone, make you fold. Make you decide that whatever piece of yourself you were holding on to wasn't worth the cost of keeping it. They expected the return to compound. Every year of compliance training was supposed to make you more theirs. Softer edges, more to lose, less willing to trade comfort for truth. That's how it works. The older the subject, the more settled, the higher the exit cost, the smaller and quieter the life. You went the other direction. Every squeeze made you less theirs. Every pressure clarified something rather than burying it. Every bet they placed on you revealed, slowly and then all at once, that the things they were using as leverage were never actually what you were holding on to. The price they'd set on your compliance was a price you'd already quietly decided not to pay. The version of you they'd invested in shaping never actually showed up. They got a negative return on a human being. That does not happen. There is not a field in their spreadsheet for it. The entire assumption underlying the system, the axiom it cannot operate without, is that everyone has a price. For their silence, their labor, their integrity, their identity. The system's job is to find the price and pay slightly less than it so the person stays hungry enough to stay useful. And when they looked for your price, they found a blank field, not a high number, not a negotiable number, a blank field, an error, a silence where the output should be, and somewhere in a room that runs on the certainty that human beings are always, without exception, purchasable, that silence is the most unsettling sound they have ever heard. Now, here is the part I want you to hear with total clarity because it reframes everything that happened to you. They were not trying to destroy you. Destroying people is expensive, messy, generates friction, occasionally creates the kind of story that makes other people start asking inconvenient questions. Destruction is for people who became too visible. You were never a target they needed to destroy. You were an inefficiency they needed to manage. And the management strategy was not cruelty. It was something more sophisticated and, when you see it clearly, far more contemptible. Manufactured exhaustion. They didn't need you to love the cage. They just needed you too tired to notice it was there. The 40-hour work week is not organized around human productivity. It is organized around human capacity for reflection. A person working 40 hours, commuting, maintaining a household, consuming entertainment calibrated to be just engaging enough to consume the remaining hours, does not have the bandwidth to examine the architecture producing that schedule. Not as a side effect, as the point. The news cycle is not designed to inform you. It is designed to occupy the anxious register of your attention, the one that feels like engagement but produces paralysis. So you finish every session knowing more facts and having less clarity than when you started. The social media loop is not connecting you to people. It is connecting you to your own insecurity on a 24-hour refresh, which means your sense of self requires constant external input to stabilize, which means you never fully arrive anywhere, which means you stay monetizable, which means you stay distracted from the question they most need you not to ask. Is any of this actually necessary? But here is the cut that matters. They didn't send enemies into your life. They sent distractions. The opportunity that wasn't quite right, but was close enough to spend 2 years on. The person who was almost what you needed but required you to betray something important about yourself to keep. The goal that felt like yours, but was built in their shape, requiring you to become their kind of person to reach it. They needed you busy, the way a wheel makes something busy, moving constantly, generating heat, going nowhere. And the thing that broke that plan was not strength, not courage, something quieter and more devastating to a system built entirely on distraction. You stopped, you looked around, and you noticed the wheel. If you've never been able to explain what you've been going through, keep watching. It's coming. Let's take inventory, not because you need to revisit it, because you've been carrying these things as evidence of your failure, and I want to show you, line by line, that they are evidence of something else entirely. They are the bill. The itemized receipt for a life they couldn't purchase. The people who left. Here is what actually happened there, because the version you probably tell yourself is kinder to them than the truth. They didn't leave because you were too much. They left because your refusal to shrink made their own smallness impossible to maintain in your presence. Not invisible, impossible. You weren't asking them to be better. You weren't even noticing that they weren't. But watching someone exist without the compromises they built their identity around became a mirror they couldn't tolerate. Their exit was not about you. It was about the fact that they'd spent years constructing justifications for choices they'd made, telling themselves these compromises were the only reasonable options, the only adult options, the only realistic options, and then you showed up existing outside those options, unbothered, and the justifications started cracking. You didn't lose those friendships. Those friendships expired. They had a shelf life that ended the moment your growth outpaced their tolerance for the person they'd agreed to need you to be. The rooms that stayed closed, the roles you didn't get, the circles that never opened, the opportunities that went to people who were, by every honest measure, less capable and more compliant. Here is what they will never say out loud in those decisions. It was never about your ability. It was about your appetite. They needed someone hungry for what they were offering, hungry enough to perform whatever rituals of submission the position required. Quiet enough when the money required silence, agreeable enough to sand off whatever edges made the existing members uncomfortable. You could do the work. You weren't willing to pay the toll on the way in. And people who are building cages always know, before anyone says a word, who's going to need to be locked in and who was never going to enter voluntarily. The loneliness. I'm not going to reframe this immediately. I'm going to let it exist here for a moment. The specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people and broadcasting on a frequency no one around you has the receiver for. The exhaustion of being just relatable enough not to alarm anyone while the thing you actually are goes completely unwitnessed. The moments, late, quiet, when the performance drops, where fitting in, where just being normal felt like it would be such a relief. Where you understood, viscerally, why people make the compromises they make, because the alternative is this particular silence. That's real. It doesn't get a reframe. It gets acknowledged. And then this, everything on that list, every person, every room, every silent night, is a receipt. Not proof that you failed at the journey. Proof that you were on one. Stationary people do not accumulate this kind of evidence. This kind of wreckage only follows someone who was actually going somewhere. Now let me show you something that I find genuinely, darkly entertaining. Every control system, corporate, governmental, social, runs on the same 3 levers. That's all it takes. 3 inputs to manage a human being. Lever 1, fear of loss. Give someone something and then make the cost of non-conformity the potential loss of that thing. You don't have to threaten explicitly. You just make sure they know, somewhere quiet in the back of their mind, that it could go. Most people will police their own behavior to protect what they have long before anyone asks them to. Lever 2, desire for status. Build a hierarchy. Make the top of it visibly, achingly desirable. Make climbing it the default definition of success. Then sell people the next rung, the better title, the better neighborhood, the better self that lives just on the other side of this next compromise. Keep the top always slightly out of reach. The climbing never stops. Lever 3, need for approval. The most reliable of all. Wire people early, in school, in family, in every social structure they pass through, to experience their own worth as something that exists outside themselves, dependent on external input to remain stable. Then become the source of that input. The person whose sense of self requires constant validation will do almost anything to maintain the supply. 3 levers. Billions of people managed. And then the operators running this system tried all 3 on you. Fear of loss. They made sure you had things and then tightened the grip. You opened your hand and let the things go. Not dramatically, quietly, as if the things they were using as leverage were never actually what you were holding on to. Desire for status. They illuminated the hierarchy, made the prizes visible, made the climb look like the only interesting game in town. You looked at the prizes and felt nothing except a flat, clinical suspicion about who decided these were the prizes in the first place. Need for approval, this one they were certain about. This one works on almost everyone because the system spends years, sometimes decades, carefully installing it. And they ran the diagnostic and found that yours had been corrupted, not destroyed, corrupted, producing a different output. Instead of calibrating your self-worth to external input, you developed the genuinely alarming habit of calibrating it to something internal, something they couldn't access, couldn't adjust, couldn't even locate on their instruments. They ran the diagnostic 3 times. Same result. Subject does not respond to standard motivational inputs, and then a blank space where the escalation protocol was supposed to be, because there is no escalation protocol. There is a space in the playbook with your name above it and nothing inside it, and that space has been blank since the first time you surprised them, and it will be blank when they close the file. You cannot patch a system that was never running your software to begin with. Here is what is happening right now in the rooms you will never be invited into. Not surveillance rooms, not threat assessments, strategic planning sessions, quarterly reviews of behavioral models, rooms full of extraordinarily well-funded professionals whose job is to understand where human attention is going, what people want, what makes people manageable, and how to position a product or a policy or a narrative in the gap. These rooms are very good at their job. They predicted the trust collapse in institutions before the data fully confirmed it. They model attention patterns with a precision that should unsettle you. And there is one type of person, not a demographic, not a generation, not a movement, just a type defined not by what they believe, but by what they declined, that keeps appearing in the data as an anomaly, a ghost, a number that refuses to behave like the other numbers. People who stopped participating in the performance, not loudly, not organizedly, not in ways that generate content or commentary or counter-narratives, just privately, individually, one person at a time, deciding that the performance of ambition and the performance of contentment and the performance of needing things they didn't actually need was no longer worth the energy it cost. And the extraordinary thing, the thing the room keeps returning to, the thing no model has been able to satisfactorily explain, is that these people seem to be fine, better than fine. Thriving by metrics the spreadsheets don't measure, living by values the framework doesn't account for, completely unreachable by every recruitment mechanism in the arsenal. The room doesn't call you a threat. The room calls you an inefficiency, a gap in the market, a segment they cannot convert and cannot explain, and most unsettling of all, cannot seem to stop thinking about. Here is the funniest thing about powerful institutions. They only fear what they understand, fear they have entire departments for, bewilderment they have nothing, and you, specifically you, the way you move through the world, the choices you keep making that produce results their models say are impossible, have been generating bewilderment in rooms you'll never see since the very first time you did something that didn't fit. They are not watching you because you are dangerous in the way they understand danger. They are watching you because you are a question they cannot stop asking and have never once, not once, been able to answer. Now here is the problem they genuinely cannot solve, and I say this not as comfort but as observable, structural fact. They can suppress information. They have done this at extraordinary scale and efficiency. They can remove content, bury results, adjust algorithms, flood zones of attention with noise until the signal vanishes. They have spent decades getting very, very good at this. What they cannot do, what no algorithm, no policy update, no platform governance document has ever successfully accomplished, is quarantine authenticity. Not because authenticity is mystical, because it doesn't travel through media, it travels through contact. When you sit across from someone who is genuinely visibly free, not performing freedom, not posting about freedom, not selling a course about freedom, but actually in possession of it, because it was built from the inside and cannot be revoked from the outside, something happens in the person across from them that no content moderation team has a protocol for. The person feels it before their brain processes it, before they decide whether they agree with your politics or your lifestyle or your choices. Something in them recognizes something in you at a level that predates language, and what it says is, this person is not performing. This person does not need me to confirm them. This person is actually impossibly okay. And that recognition plants a question. Not immediately, maybe not for weeks, but it plants it. If this is possible, what exactly is the cage I'm living in made of? You don't argue people out of cages. You don't content market them out of cages. You demonstrate that the door was open, and you walk through it, and some of them, not all of them, not even most of them, but enough of them, start to notice the door. They can ban the video. They can shadow ban the account. They cannot suppress the version of someone that emerges after spending real time around a person who has stopped needing what the system sells. That version, once it exists, does not go back. And it spreads, not virally, organically. The way things spread that don't need infrastructure because they're rooted in something the infrastructure was built to contain and couldn't. They have no firewall for that. They never will. So here is the verdict, not the one that would have been convenient, the one the evidence actually supports. You were never broken, you were incompatible, and those are not the same thing, And the difference matters more than almost anything else I've said tonight. Broken things can be repaired and returned to service. Broken things can be modified, redeployed, given slightly different instructions, and pointed at a different task. The entire apparatus of self-optimization, the productivity industry, the hustle content, the constant message that the version of you that hasn't been improved yet is the version currently failing you, is built on the premise that what's wrong with you can be fixed into something more useful to the system. You do not need fixing. You are not broken. You are running different code, and it is the system, not you, that requires replacement. The ruling on them, they are not evil. They are not omnipotent. They are a bureaucracy that grew large enough to mistake its own procedures for reality. And bureaucracies have one fatal weakness. One. They cannot adapt to what they cannot categorize. Their entire operating logic, every pipeline, every lever, every appraisal, requires the ability to name the thing first. Named things can be managed. You are the unnamed. You are the permanent exception. You are the blank field, the silent return, the gap in the data shaped exactly like someone who was never going to be owned. The instruction is simple, not a battle cry, not a declaration. Continue. Continue existing in a way their models cannot predict. Continue making choices by a compass their satellites cannot map. Continue being the question they cannot answer, the gap they cannot close, the error the machine generates every single time it tries to put a price on something that was never, not for one moment, for sale. They needed you to be something they could name. You declined. Completely, without drama, without even fully realizing for a long time that the declining was the whole thing. And now everything they built that depends on naming people, every algorithm, every category, every leveraged debt and borrowed identity and manufactured exhaustion has a gap in it, shaped exactly like you, sized exactly like the life they couldn't design for you and couldn't stop you from building anyway. That gap doesn't close, it grows, and inside it, quietly, without their permission, without their blueprint, without their funding or their approval or their category or their word. So do you. Drop one word in the comments, just one, that describes where you are right now, and subscribe. What's next builds directly on everything we just covered. You're going to want to be here.
Barran Dodger was here. Urgh!
Unlike some comparers, we're independently owned. So
How do I stop this motherfucking thing?
not